see you all. Sandra, you want to call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Courtney League as designee for Secretary Chaudhry is absent. Mr. Derenberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Eberhardt.
Here.
Secretary Flora.
Here, and Chuck Boyd will be taking over for me about midway through when I have to leave.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Gibbons.
Here.
Ms. Lala.
Here.
Dr. Wright.
Krishna Tulur representing Dr. Wright, and sorry, my video is not working.
Thank you, Krishna. And Chair Casemeyer.
Here. And
Yeah,
Courtney's here too.
Oh,
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Morning, everybody. Okay, Alex, you want to give your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Commission. Great to see you today. This month, my Executive Director's report is comprised of 2 items. The first is to announce that next week, I and 5 IAC staff members will not just attend the summer conference of the Maryland Association of Counties, but will also operate for the first time an IAC booth in the state agency section of the exhibition hall. Thanks to some great content development and organizational work by our administrative staff, we will be presenting a slideshow at our booth and handing out some very attractive literature that describes the work of the IAC, as well as some small goodies. Most importantly, however, will be the outreach conversations really that I and staff will have there as many local and state officials as well as vendors browse the booths. This is part and parcel of our expansion of outreach over the last year or two to school construction stakeholders so that more people understand the mission and work of the IAC and see more of the great work that our agency is accomplishing. Second item is a brief update on the Worcester County School Facilities Work Group in which we've been participating. On July 8, the Worcester County Commission and the Board of Education convened its first meeting of the work group, including the IAC, to discuss the school facilities capital needs of the school district, potential strategies the district and county might employ, and how the state could participate in the projects that would result from those strategies. In that meeting, I presented a summary of 4 potential scenarios in which the state might participate in a set of projects, including a replacement of the Buckingham Elementary School. From the discussion, I took away a sense of interest on the part of the Worcester folks in at least one of the scenarios. And then since that work group meeting, I and IAC staff have continued to engage with Worcester County officials in preparation for a second work group meeting. Last week, I sent to the work group members a draft set of key ingredients for a potential 3-party memorandum of understanding to support a 2-project package that the IAC could consider supporting. Just yesterday, I received an invitation to the second work group meeting, which is scheduled for the week after next. At that meeting, I expect to provide updated eligibility figures and estimates of the potential state contributions to a 2-school package in order to assist the work group in considering its options. I look forward to providing you with an update at your September meeting regarding the ongoing process with Worcester County. But in the meantime, of course, I remain available by phone to you if you have any questions about it, and I always value having your input. This concludes my Executive Director's report for August, and I'm happy to stand for any questions or to proceed with the consent agenda.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions for Alex on his report? Staff has given a lot of attention to the Worcester County issue. Hopefully it comes to a successful conclusion. The consent agenda, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, items 2A through 2F are administrative items, including the minutes from both the Commission's July meetings, as we had 2, contract awards, revisions to previously approved contracts, and a revision to 1 pass-through grant request to realign some funds between 2 Cecil County projects. And we stand for questions on any of these items.
Any questions on the consent agenda? Do I hear a motion that we approve the consent agenda? Mr. Gibbons and Ms. Eberhardt seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one comment on the contract approvals, if I may. Following this meeting, IAC staff will be posting to the IAC's website a user guide, which will guide LEA staff through how to generate a report of contract approvals in our new business management system.
Okay.
Just want to
thank
get that info out there. Thank you.
you. Item 3, something we went over last month, but we have something else to discuss. Prince George's County Phase 2 Public-Private Partnership for Public School Construction, amendment to approval of Amendment 1. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, you approved the memorandum of understanding that set the structure for the Phase 2 P3 agreement for Prince George's County to construct 8 schools. In that amendment, in that MOU, there was an attached amendment that included language to allow for setting the specific dollar amounts within the agreement with the contractor when the financial close takes place this month. And in that, we had language set out that would limit the total amount that could be agreed upon. And we had the language set to impose that cap the first year and each year thereafter, which upon review of the financial model in additional depth, we found that the availability payment could well range slightly above or below the 70 million that we had set as a rough limit for that first year and following years. We believe that this outcome does achieve the goal of this alternative financing arrangement, which is for the pricing to be predictable over the course of the partnership for 30 years so that Prince George's can budget for the costs and really integrate it into their capital planning. So after consideration and consultation with PGCPS, IAC staff recommends that the IAC amend the recent approval of that form of amendment number 1 to condition the approval on only the availability payment during the first contract year to remain at or below 70 million and expressly revoke the language and each year thereafter. And this allows for the adjustment over time of the pricing that the Prince George's County Public Schools and the vendor will be agreeing upon in their financial close. Happy to stand for any questions.
Mr. Derenberg?
So
Can't hear you. You're on mute, Mike. You're on mute.
there we go. So will we see more of these every year to approve that dollar amount, or how is that going to happen?
No, Mr. Chair, the agreement to be arrived at by Prince George's County and the vendor will include language that sets the pricing over the 30-year term. Once that's locked in, it will be calculated and it will be known upfront. So we will not have to approve numbers in the future for this agreement. However, in future, other P3 agreements that could be entered into by other counties and school districts might have different financial models and structures. They could come at their long-term annual payment mechanisms in a different manner. So I wouldn't say that this is the way it would always work, but in this case, this allows them to set the pricing for the 30-year term upfront. It just shifts, it varies a bit over the 30-year time period.
Once they get that figure for the next 30 years, we'll know it.
We'll know it. Yes, we'll know it as soon as they complete financial close this month, and we'll see those numbers and we'll be able to literally plot them out over the 30-year period. And what'll happen is the numbers will start below that 70 million level in the first year and early years, and then at some point may go a bit above that because they're adjusting in for they're factoring in inflation on the services portion of the deal, which relates to the maintenance of the facilities. So it's not really reflecting a change in construction pricing. It's reflecting the long-term expected inflation on the maintenance services side.
So you don't see in 20 years we get a, we're short?
No, because we'll see the numbers as soon as they do reach financial close. And, you know, they may be 72 million or 74 million. I don't know what the exact numbers will look like yet, but we'll be able to see them as soon as the closing is complete.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? So this is not a significant change. The Prince George's County had intended for this to be the language, but we misinterpreted.
Correct.
To do.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So do I hear a motion on,
So moved, Mr. Chair.
oh, you want to read the
Gloria Lawler.
motion? Alex, you want to read?
Oh,
the
thank you,
motion?
Mr. Chair. Yes, this is to amend the IAC's July 23rd approval of the form of Amendment 1 to the project agreement for the design, build, finance, and maintenance of Prince George's County Public Schools Alternative Construction Financing Package 2 by and between the Board of Education of Prince George's County and Progressive Education Partners, LLC. This is the project agreement. And authorize Prince George's County Public Schools to finalize and execute Amendment 1 on the condition that the availability payment solely during the first contract year in which the project readiness is achieved does not exceed $70 million as indicated in the final financial model, which will be included in Exhibit U to the project agreement and attached to Amendment 1, and to expressly revoke the language in the original approval, quote, and each year thereafter, unquote.
Thank you, Alex. Senator Law, you still want to make that motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Do I hear a second? Mr. Gibbons, any more discussion on this amendment to the P3 we adopted last month? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands, please. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4, this is sort of interesting. Adoption of FY 2026 Capital Improvement Program target allocations. Cassandra?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. A number of years ago, around 2018, the IAC recognized that LEAs needed an estimate of potential CIP funding in order to inform their local CIPs, which are in development long before final CIP allocations are made by the IAC. In order to attempt to meet this need, the IAC calculated each LEA's 10-year average allocation and established it as a funding target to stabilize LEA expectations and to provide a reasonable framework for LEAs to approve and fund their local priorities. Before the start of the FY23 CIP cycle, Built to Learn funds became available, and many LEAs expressed concern about utilizing their Built to Learn dollars immediately if it meant that their CIP requests would be decreased, which would cause their 10-year average to go down and potentially impact their future funding targets. In order to address these concerns, the IAC voted to hold or to freeze the targets for FY23, FY24, and FY25 at a consistent level that was formulated by combining the 10-year average allocation with a wealth-adjusted enrollment-based figure for each LEA. This provided stability in LEA expectations and was done to promote efficient planning and expenditure of both CIP and BTL dollars. We are kicking off the FY26 CIP cycle, and the prior funding freeze has expired. So your staff recognize that stability in allocations and expectations is critical for the LEAs to successfully plan and execute their school facilities projects. But we also recognize that continuing to use past allocations as the primary factor to develop funding targets has the potential to perpetuate funding inequities. In the proposed funding targets, we calculated wealth adjustment enrollment-based figures for each LEA and then determined a target that was halfway between those figures and the frozen funding level for 22, 23, and 24. By combining these two methodologies, we're moving the target to setting a more data-driven and formula-based methodology while softening any deviations from prior expectations. In future, we would anticipate that we would look at something like a rolling average or a rolling 3-year rolling target so that we were softening the edges the same way. It's also important to note that we did implement a 1% floor for LEAs. So every LEA has a target of at least $2.75 million in these recommendations based upon an estimated $275 million in available funding. It's also really important to remember that these are just targets. They are not guarantees. The final amount an LEA receives in the CIP will be based upon available funding, eligibility of submitted projects, statewide needs, cash flow projections, and anything else that the IAC wants to consider. The final project allocations are approved by the Commission at their May meeting. The motion for consideration is to adopt the FY 2026 Capital Improvement Program target allocations as presented. With that, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions.
Okay. For purposes of discussion, would someone like to make that motion? Ms. Everhart makes a motion, Mr. Gibbons seconds. Questions for Cassandra about this? Mr. Derenberg.
So I have some disclosure. I had to call Cassandra to find out what frozen funding was. I Googled it, and Google didn't know either. So she was walking me through the process and explained it a little bit. But my question for her and for the staff is this a positive for the LEAs, do you feel, right now, or how's it going to affect them? Or
So I think every LEA would probably have a different perspective on that. But in general, I would say that this provides a level of expectation, which is the most important thing in being able to execute a portfolio of school facilities projects, is to have a general idea of what can be expected. Of course, the General Assembly and the Department of Budget and Management change our budget. However, they feel the need to change our budget during the legislative process. And so these are all tentative based upon the outcome of the budget. 2 years ago, we saw hundreds of $1 million more than we expected, and the LEAs got a lot more money than they could have anticipated. So they're definitely used to shuffling these around. But in general, this provides some consistent expectations. And I think most of the LEAs are very pleased to have this number.
my other question is that $5 million in state reserve funds, we didn't have it before, right? So
We started holding $5 million in reserve funds about 5 years ago every year. What we didn't do is include it in our calculation of the target. So our targets were a little bit off because we didn't consider that when we calculated it. As I mentioned, for the last several years, we've actually received more funding than we anticipated. So we ended up being able to hold that $5 million and still reach the target allocation. We don't know with the general financial outlook if that's going to be the case. So we wanted to build it into the target this year. For what it's worth, that reserve fund is essentially a rainy day fund. We hold about $5 million per year for emergencies, for project cost overruns where cash flow might be time sensitive, and for any LEA that wants to request design funds outside of the normal CIP cycle to launch a project. Any remaining funds get rolled into the next year's CIP cycle. It also gives us a little bit of flexibility if we want to award some of it during the CIP. We are not beholden to reserve that funding. So, for example, last year we originally planned on reserving $5 million, but we only ended up holding $3.9 million because there were projects that we could make whole by using just $1.1 million of that planned reserve. I would think that as we consider, for example, this special Wooster project, having a little bit of flexibility moving into the next couple of years would be beneficial.
thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, if I might add a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just two things. One on that reserve portion. One of the concerns that led us to see that as being more and more necessary was when the tornado came through in Anne Arundel a couple of years ago and hit one of their high schools. And we were on the spot for a short time thinking that we were going to need to come up with a significant amount of money to assist with their repairs in a very short time period, out of cycle, obviously. Although we ended up avoiding that urgent need because ACPS was able to take care of the roof repair with local dollars in that case, we realized that as the climate events and natural disasters have seemingly accelerated in recent years, we need to be prepared for that sort of event to happen anywhere in Maryland at any time, to be able to assist an LEA that's really on the spot to get a facility to reopen to serve the students without a break. And then the second issue is the equity aspect of this more formulaic, data-driven approach. The sort of the greatest concern that I personally have had over the years about the 10-year average was that it was based significantly on actual project spending levels and allocation matched levels, which really was not necessarily based on an equity system or measure, but more on just who was able to do projects in those previous years. And so that significantly disadvantaged those LEAs that had challenges lining up their local shares to do enough of the projects that they needed to do. And this shift continues our move towards greater equity in the allocation of available state capital dollars. Thanks so much.
The 10-year average factor is still in play in this, to what degree?
Cassandra?
Roughly about 25%, Mr. Chair. Basically, 25% of the allocation is based on that 10-year average, and 75% is based on the wealth-adjusted enrollment-based formula.
Are the LEAs aware of this new proposal?
They are as of Thursday when your agenda got published, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any feedback yet?
No, we haven't heard anything. We did have one LEA reach out to ask what factors we used for the wealth adjustment consideration, and we let them know that we used the numbers published by MSDE, and they didn't express any other concerns.
Any other questions? On the motion, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item 5. COMAR revisions to clarify state-rated capacity calculation of cooperative use spaces. Cassandra?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a pretty simple COMAR change that clarifies how the IAC is defining cooperative use space in our state-rated capacity calculations. As a reminder for anyone who's watching the meeting that might not know, LEAs frequently have agreements with non-education entities, often organizations like Parks and Rec, where they provide space for student or community programming. The IAC will participate when we build a new facility in up to 3,000 square feet of cooperative use space, as long as the LEA has a letter of intent from an outside organization to partner with them for the use of that space. The state-rated capacity, which we call the SRC because we're a state agency and we like our acronyms, is not about school projects, but is about existing facilities. It's a number that represents the potential capacity of a school in terms of the number of students it could potentially serve. Currently, the COMAR that governs SRCs states that only cooperative use space designated in a written agreement is not included in the SRC. In practice, the IAC has included teaching stations, which really just means a classroom, a room that is appropriate for providing general education, that are available for educational purposes in its SRC, even though they might be covered in a cooperative use space agreement. The proposed change just clarifies and brings COMAR in alignment with current practice that cooperative use spaces are included in the SRC unless the agreement requires the teaching stations be available for non-educational purposes during regular school hours. The motion for consideration is to approve amendments to COMAR 14390205F regarding the inclusion of cooperative use space and calculation of the state-rated capacity as presented, and to authorize staff to make additional technical edits as necessary. I would note really quickly, Mr. Chair, that this is just a preliminary approval. The next steps for this, if it is approved today, is that it will be published in the Maryland Register and will be available for public comment for 30 days before it would be finally approved.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to that effect? Mr. League makes a motion, Ms. Everhart seconds. Discussion. Questions? All in favor, say aye or raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Number 6, maximum state allocation increase and award of reserve funds. Baltimore County Public Schools, Owings Mill High School, electrical upgrades. Lisa?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Commission. Baltimore County Public Schools informed the IAC staff on July 25th, 2024, that the bids received for the Owings Mill High School electrical replacement project came in higher than anticipated. This project was awarded partial funding in the FY23 CIP. BCPS has requested the balance of funding through the use of reserve funds and to also increase the maximum state allocation to help support the higher project costs. The project was originally estimated in the fall of 2021, and since that time, the market has experienced increases in manufacturing costs, transportation costs, labor, and inflation, all of which have contributed to this project coming in over the original budget. An additional $400,659 is needed to increase the maximum state allocation. Per Comar 1439-0207, the IEC sets the maximum state allocation in the State Capital Improvement Program. The IEC may increase the maximum state allocation for a systemic renovation project when the LEA has available reserve funding and when the LEA submits the bid tabulation for the project and the IEC determines the requested scope of work is eligible for state funding and the scope of work and associated costs are reasonable. Staff of the IEC have reviewed the bid tab and are in full support of the LEA's request. I will now read the motion, which is to increase the maximum state allocation for the Baltimore County Public Schools Owings Mill High School Electrical Upgrade Project from $851,000 to $1,251,659 in accordance with Comar 1439-0207B and to transfer $584,734 from the LEA's reserve account to fully fund the FY 2023 Capital Improvement Program project.
Thank you, Lisa. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved, Gloria Lawler.
Seconded by Secretary Flora. Discussion. Any questions? Mr. Derenberg.
How old is that school?
I'm not exactly sure, Mr. Derenberg. I'll have to check that date for you.
That's okay. And then, are they just upgrading the electric or are they adding on, or is it just
It's a complete electrical replacement throughout the school.
for the existing school?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Is this unusual? I mean, to happen so quickly? I mean, is the school over 20 years old?
I believe it is, Mr. Chair. I will have to check the
Okay.
exact date of the
Okay,
school.
yeah, I understand. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, for what it's worth, our IT person, Brett Stevens, is chatting me and telling me that that was his school. And from his recollection, it opened around 1980.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Mr. Chair, our database says original build 1978, additions 1993, renovations 2001 on a portion. So there are definitely some much older systems in that building.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Item 7, FY 2021 School Safety Grant Program Extension Request, Baltimore County Public Schools, Perry Hall Elementary School Intercom Replacement Project. Tatiana?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Commission. On
Morning.
July 24th, 2024, IAC staff received a 4-month extension request from Baltimore County Public Schools for the fiscal year 2021 School Safety Grant Program reimbursement deadline. Due to unforeseen delays in the supply chain, the LEA is unable to meet the established deadline for the Intercom replacement project at Perry Hall Elementary School. The IAC has previously approved a revised fiscal year 2021 SSGP application schedule at the September 8th, 2022 meeting, and again at the March 14th, 2024 meeting. The extension will allow for the installation of the remaining devices, review of invoices, and payments to the vendor. I will now read the motion, which is to approve an extension to the fiscal year 2021 School Safety Grant Program, Baltimore County Public Schools Intercom Replacement Project at Perry Hall Elementary School, reimbursement deadline from August 5th, 2024 to December 5th, 2024.
Thank you, Tatiana. Do I hear a motion? Mr. League and Mr. Gibbons seconds. Discussion. Any questions? Mr. Derenberg.
They started this yet, or is this still planning, or?
To my understanding, the project is started. They're just needing this extension to get everything reviewed and to get the vendor paid.
So it's
They still
installed.
have some they still have some devices remaining to be installed.
Okay, so most of it's done. We're just finalizing it.
to my understanding. Lisa, do you have a different understanding?
That's correct, Tatiana. They've ordered the equipment and they're just waiting on a few final pieces to come in, and the timing with school being back in session soon and being able to get into the building to perform the work is delaying the final payments and getting the vendors completed and paid out.
Okay, so they bought the equipment, but it's not installed.
Correct. There's still some equipment to be installed.
Have a final date for that?
I will have to check. I will have to check their request. They've laid out the time frame for when they should be done. But I will check on that for you, Mr. Derenberg.
I just don't want this whole septic or scenario come back around again from last time.
They had a few intercom projects that kind of fell in this same time frame with need an extension. This is another one in that grouping, so it made sense for the information they've provided us previously.
If we just find out when it's going to be completed, that'd be great.
I will check on that.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Number 8, amendments to FY 2025 School Safety Grant Program, Notice of Funding Availability. Arabia?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair,
Morning.
Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Commission. This item is a request to correct and reissue the allocation table included as Attachment 1 of the FY 2025 School Safety Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability, approved by the IAC at your July meeting. This amendment is being requested because data shown in Attachment 1 did not accurately reflect the allocations available for each local education agency. The appropriate corrections have been made, and as a courtesy, we have reached out to the 5 LEAs that will see a slight decrease in funding. I can now read the motion, which is to approve amendments to Attachment 1 of the FY 2025 School Safety Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability as presented to reflect accurate percentages and calculated allocations based on adjusted enrollment and square footage totals for each local education agency.
Thank you, Arabia.
You're welcome.
Do I hear a motion to that effect? Ms. Everhart and Mr. Lee seconds. Questions about this? Mr. Lee, do you have a question? Oh, okay.
No, sir.
Anybody have a question? Okay. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Arabia.
Thank you.
So our next agenda item, the commission expects to discuss a personnel matter pursuant to section 3-305, the general provisions article of the annotated code of Maryland. I will now ask for a motion to close the meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Gibbons, Everhart seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries. The board will adjourn the meeting from closed session. Thank you.
Okay, I have ended the stream. I'm going to make Alex the host, and